Hello and welcome to Elaine Online. Today I take a look at two of the other novels that I've recently read by John Wyndham, The Midwich Cuckoos and Chocky. In the 1970s, I'd read John Wyndham's novels, The Day of the Triffids and The Chrysalids. I enjoyed both of his novels, but they were the only two that I read back when I was in high school. Recently, I decided to check out some of his other works after I reread The Day of the Triffids and Chrysalids. The Midwich Cuckoos is a novel about a young couple who travel to London for a day and return to their hometown to discover that they cannot get to their house. The town is surrounded by the military, and everyone within the town, including animals, have all just gone to sleep. Our narrator ends up being one of the people who fell asleep as he decides to walk past and try and get into the town. Just as suddenly as everyone went to sleep, a short time later, they all wake up. Shortly after that, the town is shocked to discover that women of childbearing years are now pregnant. As you can imagine, that causes quite a stir within the community. And it becomes even more bizarre when some of the women are virgins and suddenly expecting. Gordon Selby is an author and philosopher who lives in the village. He takes an active interest in the infants after they are born and begins to develop a relationship with the new children. The village has a research laboratory called The Grange. Nobody seems to know what kind of work is actually done there, and there is a lot of suspicion after the women discover they're pregnant that somehow this facility had something to do with that. 4 of the researchers, however, are also pregnant. The village comes to terms with the situation. The children are born and they all have gold eyes. The boys all look similar to each other and the girls all look the same as each other. So it's very difficult to tell them apart. The novel also gives us a commentary on the changes in society, as our character Gordon Selby is walking along and he comes across a woman who is breastfeeding, and she is absolutely mortified. She tells him that you would understand if yours was one of the day out babies. In other words, she's implying that breastfeeding in public is certainly not her choice and not something that she can avoid doing. Now in 2022, a woman breastfeeding in public would not be considered something unusual or something to be mortified about. A few months after the babies are born, in November, a flu goes through the community and 3 of the babies die. The Grange closes and the staff leave behind 4 of their babies, and a new group moves in to study the children. Another character that we meet in the story is Bernard Westcott. He works for the military, and he asks our narrator and his wife to keep an eye on the children and let him know of any changes that they notice. Westcott, of course, is privy to information that our narrator and for a while the reader is not. It is interesting to see how he handles the information that he keeps private and how that changes throughout the novel and the changes with the children. Gordon Zellaby, another main character in our novel, is both an author and a philosopher, and he is quite interested in the children, as his daughter is one of the mothers. Gordon develops a relationship and a rapport with the children and keeps very careful observations on them. It is Gordon who first notices that when a child learns something, so for example, he does a little experiment with one of the boys and he shows him a toy. The little boy learns how to open it up, and Gordon realizes that when he gives that toy to another child who's nowhere near the first one, the second child has absolutely no trouble opening it up. He's also the one who notices that during an inquisition on an accident, the children are able to control people with their minds. So there's a lot of different events that are happening and changing as the children grow older. Our narrator ends up moving to Canada and returns 8 years later. So the children are now older, and a lot of things have changed within the community. The children now reside at what was formerly known as the Grange. There is the inquisition regarding the death of a young man in the village. The villagers are scared and angry about the children and uncertain what to do as violence begins to escalate. There are difficult decisions to be made, and it is our character Gordon Zellaby and our character Bernard Westcott who begin to wonder why the escalation in violence. And it is Westcott who shares the information that Midwich is not the only village to have experienced what they called the day out. It happened in a number of other countries, but Midwich is where the children have been able to thrive and grow. The other community was in Russia, and because they knew that the children could communicate telepathically and pick up on things from other people, a village was bombed with no warning and everyone was annihilated. The children in Midwich knew when that bombing occurred, not because of the news, and suddenly realized they needed to protect themselves in case that happened in Midwich. The children are counting on the fact that not only are they able to control people with their minds and pick up on any plans that people may have to do them harm, the villagers have some very difficult decisions to make, both in terms of protecting themselves and what to do about the children, who have become more violent and more dangerous than they ever suspected. The last few chapters are definitely full of suspense, adventure, and having to make some difficult decisions. And the ending is quite a surprise. It is a novel definitely worth reading. It brings up a lot of interesting points, decisions, and again, how different humans who have the same goals, as in working together and moving forward as a society, but the very different viewpoints and methods they have for getting to that survival. Hopefully you give it a try. Chocky is a novel about an 11-year-old boy named Matthew. Matthew has a friend that no one else can see that he talks to quite regularly. It is interesting to note that Matthew knows not to tell other people about his friend. And when his mother and father realize that he is chatting with an invisible friend, it is something that they both stress. The novel speaks to, again, differences and how other people respond to that, whether it's your own family members, people that you meet at school, or the community at large. Matthew knows to keep quiet. As I said, he just speaks to his parents about Chocky. Unfortunately, that doesn't stay the status quo. Matthew has started to produce some very interesting artwork, and his well-intentioned teacher sends one of his pieces into a contest. The piece wins, and there is an article in the newspaper about it. Around the same time, there is an accident when they are at the lake, and Matthew, who cannot swim, manages to not only save himself, but save his sister. Unbeknownst to Matthew, a reporter comes and speaks to him, and there is an article in the paper, and they want to give him an award for saving his sister. During this time, Matthew's father is also struggling with what is the best way to handle this situation. They decide to send him to a psychiatrist, and different events flow from that. Suddenly one day, Matthew is taken from school. His parents, of course, are frantic. A week later, Matthew suddenly reappears. It seems the people who took him decided that although Matthew's invisible friend seems to have information and knowledge that could potentially be useful to them, Matthew does not cooperate during the time that they had him, so they simply dump him off and leave him to find his own way home. It is up to the reader to decide what kind of people had taken Matthew. In other words, was it the government? Was it some other type of secret agency? Was it someone just trying to exploit Matthew? We're not really told, so that is up to the reader to decide. Matthew's friend, Chocky, after the kidnapping situation, realizes that to continue communicating with Matthew and helping him out with things like creating art, giving him the ability to swim and save and rescue his sister, is dangerous for Matthew. Chocky decides that it is best to stop communication and simply to leave. The last few chapters of the novel are quite moving and heartfelt, as Chocky has a conversation with Matthew's father and explains why he has to leave Matthew. The last few chapters of the novel are quite moving and heartfelt. It is a difficult decision for Chocky to leave Matthew, as the conversations are quite interesting and the desire is to mutually share and learn from each other. But after the kidnapping, Chocky realizes that to continue that connection will put Matthew in danger for the rest of his life. And that is something that Chocky simply does not want to do. Chocky speaks with the father, and they have a very moving and interesting conversation. The novel is an interesting read for a variety of different reasons. It again takes a look at, like many of Wyndham's novels, what happens when people have something different about them, whether that's communicating with a higher intelligence at a far distant location within our galaxy. What happens when children are born that are from another world? Wyndham has a very interesting way of bringing across a message, keeping a reader engaged, and really making you stop to think about your own worldviews and how do you respond to the various things going on in your world. I hope that you enjoyed this commentary on the novels. If you did, please be sure to hit the like button. If you're interested in more content about different books and different subjects, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click on the notification bell so you know when I upload new content. If you've read the Midwich Cuckoos or Chocky, please leave me a comment below and let me know what you thought about the novels. I hope that you found this interesting, and until next time, happy reading.